mindset about dress where you want to be.
That's when you need to start adjusting your diet. You start adjusting your eating habits, your exercise.
You have to learn to have some type of balance in your life.
Welcome to Let's Talk About It with your agent, Ayana, the podcast where we unpack everything from insurance essentials to the secrets of wellness, business insights, and the thrilling journey of entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Ayana, your friendly State Farm agent, and I'm here to guide you through the often mysterious but always fascinating realms of life, coverage, and success. So buckle up, subscribe, and get ready to dive into conversations that matter. This is where we talk insurance, health, business, and everything in between. Let's talk about it. Hello, everyone. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Brian Brakefield, the driving force behind the Brian Brakefield State Farm Insurance Agency in McDonough, Georgia, and Conyers, Georgia. With over a decade of experience and a commitment to exceptional customer service, Brian's expertise is unmatched. Join us as we explore his journey, values, and dedication to protecting families. Welcome, Brian. Brian, again, thank you so much for joining us for the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I
I'm
really
grateful.
appreciate you. I know that you're super busy, so yes.
No, I'm grateful. Thank you. Thank you for letting me hang out with you.
Well, I appreciate it. So, again, today we're going to discuss team dynamics, how you basically build your team. I want to know what steps you take in order to create and build a dynamic team.
I mean, I'll tell you, it's really not that simple to answer. I mean, it's a culture thing, and so you got to learn this word culture. And when you really understand what culture means, you'll apply it to a lot of things and to a lot of areas of your life. But I mean, it's a combination of being like earnest and sincere, really showing what you are about, like how you act versus what you say, right? Like the old adage, show me, don't tell me. And then it's about holding a standard, you know, and like I said, it's way more dynamic to answer in just a few minutes, but what it really starts with is one person, right? Like, and that's you.
Right.
And you know, lead by example is really cliche, but it's a fact, right? And you have to do that when it's hard, right? Like when I have friends that go into politics, I always tell them, it's like, look, you got to learn how to say no as well as you can say yes, right? And so as a leader, you got to learn how to do the things that are the hardest for you in front of others, right? And what I mean by that is really put your ambition aside and your own motives and goals for yourself aside to help further that of the person that's on your team, right? And that's hard, and that's really hard to do, holding that standard and holding yourself to it. But I mean, there's a lot of aspects to this building this team piece, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you got to do it every day.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
There's so many agents that talk about building a team and a culture, and they're just not engaged. And you got to be engaged. But I think people can see through you when you're not being sincere, and like I said, when you're not being earnest. And I always say this, like, there's only two currencies you can buy wisdom with, and that's time and experiences, right? And so God controls the time and we control the experiences. So if I had a piece of advice, it would be to create as many experiences with your team as you can to let them really see who you are, right?
Great. Awesome. So what key attributes do you look for in a team member?
You know, I was watching this podcast about a year ago, and they really summed it up. And they were talking about how the Navy SEALs will put emphasis on certain characteristics with people, and how their number one emphasis is on trust. And I don't know if it's true, it's just something I saw online, but it really resonated with me. Trust and teamwork are like my two biggest things. And I used to think that was because of my military career, my police career, but really what it is it's just who I am since I was a kid, right? Like trust and working together have always been like super important to me. And so I gauge that from the day that I meet them, right? Like from the very first interview, I'm trying to gain if I can trust them. And what I mean by that is I'm testing them to see if they have humility, to see if they have like the self-awareness or the emotional intelligence to be honest with you about their weaknesses as much as their strength. So, you know, I always joke, like I've been single for a long time. We talked about this earlier, like I'm super career focused and focused on my son. But I've come to realization lately I'm as picky about hiring people as I am about dating. And that's probably a problem because I've been single for a long time. So I might need to lighten up on that. But really, I mean, bringing in the wrong person, we all know it's a cancer, but when you really get that culture going on and you really get a good team of people that are like-minded, or let's not say like-minded, let's say have like goals,
Gotcha.
right? And then they have the characteristics to succeed in an environment with others to reach those goals. When you get that, it's so fragile. It's like a really fragile ecosystem, right? Like you pour a little bleach in that and the whole thing's done.
Yeah.
So we are super hardcore on the front end. I mean,
Really?
we look for characteristics. We look for experience. And I'm not talking about job experience, I'm talking about life experience. Yeah, so the front end is where it's at. And I mean, we probably get, I would say, between 50 and 75 resumes a week. Yeah, and I mean, we interview maybe 3 people a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're that particular. Yeah, so once you start finding what works in your environment, what works in your team culture, you just can't disrupt it. And then the other thing about that is I had this guy say years ago, and this stuck with me too, years ago, I'm talking like 15 years ago. He said it was a real crazy political environment when this was happening, like it was like a presidential election or something like that. And this guy said something, and I didn't necessarily agree with his politics, but I respected the hell out of his philosophy on this. He said, I'm really open about my politics because I only want to do business with people that understand the way I think and can relate to that. And I was like, God, that's polarizing. But at the same time, I was like, Jesus, it's kind of genius, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's like making music. You couldn't make music for a genre that you don't really feel passionate about.
Right.
So why even try, right?
Right.
So that's another thing about the culture and the team environment is like when I started my rebuild that we were talking about years ago,
Yeah.
one of the big things that I decided when I was going to make that rebuild was I had to do it my way, right? I'm never going to fit the mold of what I thought an insurance agent should be or
Yeah.
what I thought I should look like or dress like. And when I started doing that, I started attracting people that had similar values. And even if it was just like little different values, but we had other things in common, music, the way we dress, the way we like to carry ourselves. And when I started down that path, I'll never go back, right? Because now when I'm leading them, they understand what I'm trying to get to when I'm trying to lead them, right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is awesome. I've talked to so many different agents who have stated that turnover within their agency is astronomical. It's extreme. What would you tell those agents?
So look, I was that way. When I started doing this rebuild, and I may have this number wrong, but 1 year I went through something, or a year and a half, I went through something like 18 W-2s, right?
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I just had people coming in there, and that year, the reason that was happening was because I knew I was terrible at leading. I knew I was terrible at interviewing. I mean, I just knew it, right? Like, I don't mind saying it. I was bad at it. And so I was like, the only way I can fix this is to just keep failing at it over and over until I figure it out.
Gotcha.
Right? That's the way my brain works, is just keep failing until I figure it out. And so you have to reflect on yourself when you have that high turnover, period. Yeah. I was just talking to a really tenured agent about this morning. And it's funny, I called him about a transfer, a customer transfer. And it's funny how when you get experience in this industry and you get tenure, those conversations are totally different. Like this conversation was 2 seconds about the customer transferring and then 20 minutes about life and what it is to be a leader and a man and all this sort of stuff. And we were talking about that very thing is if you don't have tenured team members, that's the biggest reflection of who you are as a leader. Unless all those team members went on to be aspirants, and that's a big indicator too, and in a totally different direction, right? Yeah. So you got to reflect on yourself, and if you've got that high turnover, you're really sucking at something.
Okay. Straight
up. I mean, really, what? There's no other way to put it. You suck at interviewing, or you suck at leading, one of the two.
So let me ask you this: when you say tenured, what is your definition of tenured?
Well, right now, so I'm a 14-year agent. My longest tenured team member, well, I had one that was 7 years, and she passed away this summer. God bless her.
Gosh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but the next tenured team member is like 6 years.
Really?
Then I have a 5-year, and then I have a couple like 3 and 2 year. But when I started that rebuild of my agency back in like 17, 18, I mean, most of my employees have been there less than 2 years, less than a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you got to look at it relative. If you're a 2 or 3 year agent, you're not going to have team members. You may get lucky and have one there that whole time, but probably not. But at that point, I was a 7-year team member with 1 or 2 year employees.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's bad. That's bad. If you don't see that as a reason to reflect on yourself, then you got a problem. You got a self-awareness problem anyway.
Yeah, and I'm going on 3 years. It'll be 3 years in November, so I'm excited about that. I'm learning and professionally developing every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Evolving.
Yes.
Yeah, evolving. And so let's think about this. So now that's relative, right? So when we're talking about this team member turnover and stuff, I'm thinking of agents that have been 5, 6, 8, 9 years, 14 years like me. But those first few years, you got to give yourself a break because you're still learning, right? Like you're still learning. Look, I'll tell you something about me. I'm a high school graduate, barely graduated high school. I had 1 quarter of college, right? And I did that just to test it out. It wasn't for me. I had to get back to work. So my first few years of agency was my college, right? That's where I was really learning this stuff. And I probably spent more than the average college tuition learning that stuff too, right? Like wasted a lot of money.
Right.
But those first few years, that's what you have to be doing. And if you're not failing and re-experimenting and reinventing yourself over and over those first 3 or 5 years, then you're not on track anyway, right? I mean, that's the years you're supposed to learn that stuff. And I said this earlier, and I gotta say it again. If I was where you are at this point in your career, I'd be a lot further than where I am at this point in my career.
I appreciate it.
So kudos to you, man.
Thank you. Thank you. It's all God. It's all God.
And you.
God first. But
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But he puts it on us to put in the work too, right?
Absolutely.
And you're putting in the work. I mean, look.
Definitely trying.
You know, it's 2 a.m. on a Friday night. We're sitting here filming this.
2 in the morning.
Yeah, you've been working all night.
Brian, you are a mess. So, Brian, another question regarding teams. How do you empower your team and how do you make them feel that they are important?
So here's the thing. So anytime you lead someone, especially in an environment like where we do, where we're relying upon their results, right? You have to make sure you understand clearly what their goals are, and then you have to work every day to help them have a path to achieve those goals. Like we have a saying in our office called trust the process, right? And we can tell when somebody's not trusting the process. And I was talking to one of my team members today that was really struggling his first year and just blossomed this second year. I said, man, we don't say trust the process to just anybody. If we don't think that you have what it takes in you to be successful, we usually just say, hey, this isn't working out, right? So we just tell them trust the process, and we constantly are motivating and pushing them to achieve their goals. But this is where it comes down to what I was saying earlier, is you have to make sure you're hiring people that you can relate to and that can relate to you. Otherwise, they're not going to trust you, because that trust comes down. Like that trust is the bottom line, period, with you and them. So for me, it is like, I'm telling you, I've parted ways with some very high producers. I mean, I'm talking 80, 90, 100 app producers, because there was just a trust factor there. And sometimes it wasn't even things that they necessarily had done outright. But I mean, you just got to trust yourself, right?
Right.
I mean, I got 48 years of life here to go on. If something doesn't feel right, it's probably not.
Yeah.
Right? So going back, they have to trust you too. And so I challenge my team. I say this all the time in our team meetings, especially when we do we spend a lot of time together. Like we'll do quarterly stuff, we'll go out, we'll do whatever.
Yeah.
And I tell them, I say, look, man, I challenge you to put me in a position to where you have to see if I'm going to help you or not. Like, period. Like, I don't care if it's you've had too much to drink or your family's on hard times or something, whatever the case is. I challenge you to put me in a position to see if I can live up to what I'm telling you or not.
Yeah.
And so it's all about that. It's all about like building that trust and then primarily helping them figuring out what their goals are and giving them a clear and sincere path to get there. Because I'll tell you another thing too, is a lot of us agents are greedy, like straight up greedy, right? Like I didn't come from much, like not knocking my parents, we had a great life and all that sort of stuff, but you know, money was always a problem, right? Well, you know, I'm not greedy, man. Like we spread the wealth in our office.
Yeah.
We all benefit, we all thrive. And like when you really, really invest in your team and they see that if the office wins, they win. And I'm not talking about like giving them a basket and letting them choose a card that might have some gift cards. I'm talking about like really fundamentally affecting their life and the quality of life. Dude, that's it. Once they get it and they start trusting that process and they see it. I mean, we had a 25-year-old kid that worked for us for about 9 months, and he was really, you know, he's like I was when I was 25. He's probably staying out a little too late, that kind of stuff. And very talented, very skilled. And it kind of came to a head back in October. And we just had our final like heart-to-heart come to Jesus meeting, like our final one, right? And you know, the thing is, you can have these conversations without being mean or hateful, right? It was just a really heartfelt, like, dude, no one's bigger than the organization, and that includes a high producer. So this is what you gotta do or you're out.
Right.
And man, up until that point, his highest commission was like $3,000 or $4,000 on a good month. And man, he's since in the last 2 months, he's made about $15,000 in commission. And he tells us all the time, he's like, you guys kept saying trust the process. I just had to commit. Yeah.
$15,000 in commission.
Yeah, it's the next
Does he
month.
have a cousin?
Yeah. If he did, he'd be on payroll. Yeah.
Right, I'm sure he would.
If he did and he was worth hiring, he or she would be on payroll. No, I mean, this kid was really talented, and the most apps he had done in a month was like 80. December, he did 144 apps. It's the most anyone in the history of my company has done in 1 month. And it was all because he finally started trusting the process, and he sincerely understood that we were here for him, right? Because we didn't just fire him on the third time that he was a problem. But the only reason he stayed that long is because we saw it in him, right? We believed it in him. Now, we'll see what happens in a year from now. You can't predict the future,
right?
But you just have to invest in them, and they have to sincerely see that you are going to be there for them and that you want them to achieve their goals, and you have a path to get them there.
Yeah.
Right? Because I've been in that situation as an agent too, where I sincerely believed in their goals, but I didn't have a damn clue what I was doing, right?
Yeah.
And so they were never going to get there. They can see that too, right?
Gotcha. So I appreciate you sharing all of that knowledge with the audience. I know that information, it definitely helped me, so I know it's going to help other people.
Awesome.
So just to shift or switch gears, life insurance. So can you talk about what building a legacy via life insurance means to you, and how you recommend families go about doing that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, the way you frame that, there could be a lot of avenues to answer it, but I'll just tell you, growing up in like a lower middle class family, money was always a problem, like always a problem. But life insurance was always looked at as at least a temporary solution to that problem. So even as a young kid, my dad used to talk about life insurance, and that's wild, man. I mean, my dad didn't leave a lot of nuggets for me to carry. And I mean, he's still alive. I haven't talked to him in years. So that's kind of how that relationship is, right? But there's some things that he did instill in me as a kid, and it was this whole life insurance piece. So when I got into insurance, I mean, I really had a lot of reservations coming into this career. I was like, man, I'm not a salesman. I don't want to be a salesman, this and that. And then when I took this career path, I was like, all right, look, I'm going to do two things, and if it's God's plan, it's God's plan. I'm going to work harder than anyone else because I'm already used to working hard. I'm going to outwork everybody, right? And I'm going to be as honest as I can, period. And so I got in the industry and I saw how important life insurance was to the industry, right? Because look, home and auto is the bricks of the building. Life insurance depends on how nice the stuff is that we got, right? That's how our industry works. And it was a very, very easy path for me to go down with the life insurance because I believed in it so much. Because that is how you can change the course of your entire family's history, good or bad. Right? Because we've seen it, good or bad. And so, yeah, I mean, it can change the entire, you talk about building a legacy. I'll give you an example. So I lost a friend about a year and a half ago, really, really good friend. Yeah, it was hard. I mean, we were texting until like 1 o'clock in the morning. By 3:30 he was gone, right? And I'm still close to his family. We were really close. And man, if he didn't have life insurance, and he didn't even have it with me, we talked about it, we discussed it, what he had was best for him. So it wasn't even with us. He had a really good plan with another company, so we kept it there. And let me tell you, this guy had a 14-year-old daughter, an 18-year-old daughter about to start Boston College, and a wife that's a public school teacher, right? And he was making six figures for years. And so when he passed, it could have changed the entire course of that family's history. Right. Everything would have changed. Think about it. His daughter is 2 months away from starting a college that costs $70,000 a year. And so that's a really good example of how, this guy was spending $190 a month on this life insurance policy that we all think we'll never need. And it changed the entire course of his family's history for good, for the better. And unfortunately, we see that more often than not in the opposite direction. Right. We see that, right? Right. If there wasn't, GoFundMe would have about 1/8 of the business they probably have now. Right. It's just, listen, I just think it's a responsibility. And frankly, coming from a lower income demographic growing up, that was the only way we were ever going to generate wealth. Let's just be honest, right? That was how we were going to generate wealth. And if we didn't have that one big break when somebody passed away, it was never going to happen. Now, we didn't have that in my family, but I certainly saw how that was a very, very clear strategy. Yeah. Look, there's industries for the last 200 years that have been built on the life insurance policies they had on somebody else, right? Why wouldn't we do that? Right. Why wouldn't we do that?
Right.
you know, it's
Absolutely.
for the cost of some Snicker bars and some Mountain Dews each month.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing that information. Last question. What's next for Brian Brakefield?
Man, I don't know. Hopefully about 5 more offices. Yeah, we'll see.
Brian already has 2 offices. Brian.
I mean, look, I'm still young, man. I mean,
Oh my goodness gracious.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I'm working on. I'm running to number 3. I mean, today,
Wow.
the only reason I told corporate this, the only reason I opened the second one because you got to have 2 to have 3, and then we'll keep going to the next.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for you. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
You were just inducted into the $1 Million Round Table.
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
congratulations
Thank you.
there.
Thank you.
I mean, you are doing the doggone thing, and I've learned so much from you. Just talking to you
I
and
appreciate
just,
that.
I mean, everything. So keep up the awesome work.
Look, the hardest part about getting on top is staying there, right? So we'll see what happens. But I'll tell you, you got a lot more to learn. We're going to spend a lot of time together. I'm excited.
Absolutely.
I'm excited about it. And
Me too.
Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Appreciate it.
Hi, audience. We are back with Dr. Eddie. Thank
Hello.
you so much for coming back, Dr. Eddie.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about HIV and AIDS, some of the misconceptions, and just different things that we can do to decrease.
To decrease our risk of HIV and AIDS. Well, hello again, everyone, and it's good to be back. It's good to discuss some more topics. This is probably a sensitive topic, HIV and AIDS, and I'll date myself a little bit. I was alive and in medical school when the epidemic of HIV started. And I was actually at Morehouse, and we did a skit where we talked about how people contract HIV. And that was when HIV and AIDS was a killer disease. But I'm grateful to say in my evolution of my career, HIV and AIDS is now a chronic disease. And it's even preventable. Fortunately, that's a good thing, because when it first came about, there was no real treatments. All we had was the one drug that we had for HIV, and that was the only thing we had. And you had to get on it, and you had to get on it very quickly before you stopped it. And a lot of people were already at the stage of AIDS before we do it. But as you know, you hear much less about people having AIDS now.
Right.
There is a prevalence of HIV. It's only, believe it or not, I say only, it's about 0.3% of the population, United States population, has HIV, okay, or AIDS, because it is much better control, much better screened for, and there are preventative methods for HIV. And so, but there are high-risk groups. And we have to be careful. And so, as younger people, it's still in a younger group, I would think, because they practice what we would call risk behavior. Because now there's 2 groups of folk that are really affected by HIV and AIDS. And I mean, others can be affected, but it's mainly in men having sex with men and with injectable drugs. So if you're doing those 2 things, you're in a high risk group. There's also, and then as we all know, unfortunately, everything sort of hits the African American population. African American women, transgender African American women, are infected 62%. Now there's a 0.3%, prevalence in the United States, but 62% African American transgender women. Okay, that's the highest risk. And then the next group is actually Asian women, about 65% of that population. Okay, so
let me ask you this.
Sure.
I never see an Asian woman on those commercials. Why is that? I always see other demographics, but I never see an Asian woman. I never see anyone that is outside of the black and brown group. This is just a side note. I wonder why that is.
That's probably, when you look at the statistics, it does make you go, wonder why that is. Because if they're the next highest risk group, then you would think that there would be a lot of emphasis on them. But as you look at commercials and infomercials, you're right. It's a lot of African Americans, people of color, that are actually being shown that are prevalent with HIV. I think one of the things that highlight that is, translation from other countries. For instance, we know HIV and AIDS are still killing a whole lot of folk in Africa. I mean, it's running rapid. So there's still a lot of trying to get the right medications to them, trying to get an adequate medication. So I don't know if some of that's bleeding over to have to influence that population, but that's definitely, they're right in that group, the transgender African American women, but Asians are actually more people of color. The other group, and being in Atlanta, we need to be real careful because it's women that are, what do they call it? Transactional sex, which means trafficking women who have sex in prostitution. That is a very high group of having HIV and transmitting HIV and AIDS. And we know Atlanta is one of the high traffic slave trade hubs in the country. I mean, a lot of studies have shown that. So there's a lot of publicity. So we have a lot of that passing through. So as Atlanteans or people in this area, we should be very careful practicing unsafe sex, okay? And one of the things that you talk about risk or how to reduce the risk, one of the things that I found, if men having sex with men, if they're the receptor of uncondom use having sexual, they increase their risk of getting HIV by 10 to 15% times, not percent, times, versus if you're the one penetrating. So that's something they really need to look at if they're receiving versus giving, because their risk goes up by 10 to 15 times. And so condoms is a very good, is a reasonable method of helping folk not to get HIV and AIDS. One of the other things that's encouraging about the epidemic and the transition of HIV is that following your viral load and PrEP, which is pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is PrEP, which is actually medication that individuals can now take that will reduce, with a reduced viral load, a non-detectable viral load, they can't transmit sex. They can't transmit HIV, I should say. So what's the exposure? The exposure is really two ways. It is truly having sex, okay? And the other way to be exposed is exchanging needles. Those are the two prevalent groups. So you can't get it from eating behind somebody. You can't get it from touching something. Somebody's touching that HIV. I mean, there are probably a lot of people walk around us that we don't even know that's HIV positive. And that's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing, because that's where research has taken us to, is that now we don't have the people dying, because we know. If you have, I think, as you know, I work in several different hospitals, and I've probably seen, I recently had a case where a gentleman had HIV probably about 2 months ago. That was really, and he had progressed to AIDS. That was one of the few cases I've seen in years where somebody has progressed, because he would not follow through on his treatment. I mean, because there are also very effective medications out there. There's several medications out there that you can actually take for HIV and control the spread and the progression of the disease state. But one of the things that we're actually finding that people are on PrEP, because we can't tell people how they should sexually behave, but there's definitely increased risk behaviors that can expose you to HIV. And if you're in that group, transgender, if you're men having sex with men, if you're a female having unprotected sex with a partner, you don't know their actual history, then you're exposing yourself to increased risk. So we're saying that you should be using condoms. If you're getting STIs now, which is sexually transmitted infections, and they say if you've had syphilis, gonorrhea, or chlamydia, then there's definitely an increased risk, particularly in transgender. Now, for women and that are heterosexual women, they're saying if you've had syphilis or gonorrhea, you've somehow they're thinking you're exposed, have a higher risk of being exposed to HIV, and you need to be tested. And testing is not what it used to be. It's not stigmatized as much as it used to be. So folk can actually get tested, and they can know their status, and then they can actually start to take medications or do preventive sort of treatments to not allow them to progress. They've got to follow their medication regimen, and they need to follow their viral load. If you get your viral load down to, so the viral load, let me explain a little bit about that. that is how much of the actual virus you have in your body, okay? And you can actually push that all the way down to virtually zero. And so that's when we had the real epidemic. We didn't know how to control the viral load of the virus in the body, which is what attack your white blood cells, which then open you up to multiple infections. Because you need your white blood cells, because those are the fighting cells of the body. And that's what HIV and AIDS would do, was it would deplete those cells. So now we know how to detect your CD4 count, and we know how to detect your viral load, so that we can actually treat you so that that load goes down, your CD4 count stays up, and you kind of live a healthy life. So it's more of a chronic disease more than it used to be a death sentence. When somebody said, oh, I got HIV, you was like, okay, you're gonna progress to decease at a young age. So we've gotten much better at that. But I think, you say, how do you decrease it? Well, we need to work on drug uses, and even if, not to condemn or judge anybody, we try to be less judgmental now.
Right.
Even if you're IV drug users, there are needle transition programs that you don't have to use the same needles that somebody else uses, so there's ways to present it. So again, I think it goes back, just as we talked about in colorectal cancer, it's about prevention and not treatment. I say to my patients often, prevention is worth a pound of cure. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so prevention is the best thing to do in order that we don't have to try to cure you, because sometimes, you just don't respond to the treatment and you ended up passing. So, and that's unfortunate.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. So once again, you have provided us with an insane amount of knowledge regarding the HIV and AIDS topic. Thank you so much for coming on the show again.
Absolutely.
It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you, Dr. Eddie.
Well, I'm glad you appreciate me, and I'm glad to be here to share the knowledge.
Thank you for tuning in to another insightful episode of Let's Talk About It with your agent, Ayana. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today as much as I did. Remember, your feedback matters, so don't forget to like, share, and comment if you found value in today's episode. Stay connected with us on social media at Your Agent Ayana for behind-the-scenes content, updates on upcoming episodes, and a sneak peek into the life of a State Farm agent navigating the worlds of insurance, health, business, and entrepreneurship. And as we wrap up today, always remember, your dreams are worth protecting. Your well-being is non-negotiable, and your journey in business and life is uniquely yours to thrive in. Until next time, stay protected, stay inspired, and stay blessed.